So this is Unit 7, and now we're talking about the forms of the middle voice that you didn't have in the lesson on the passive, because in fact, all of the forms that you've already learned as being passive, except for the weird ones, the aorist passive and the future passive, all those forms that you learned in lesson 6 are actually middle as well as passive. Okay, so you know a huge number of middle forms already, and that means that the only things we need to learn that's new in this lesson are the forms of the future passive middle rather, and the aorist middle, because you already know all the others. And the general rule here is really straightforward. The way to form the future middle and the aorist middle is to do the rules for forming a future and use what you think of as the passive endings, the my, psi, tai, methus, the ntai endings for the future, and the main, sa, ta, methus, the nta endings for the aorist. You have to put an augment in for the aorist because it's a past tense. Okay, so we're talking about the indicative. And then we're going to talk about the aorist middle subjunctive and optative and infinitives, okay, which basically follow the same general rules. This is a system after all, so I think these forms are mainly predictable, but here we are. At least he's shown you what the future middle indicative looks like. You've got the stem, this is for luo, the stem is lu, the S is the sign of the future with an O or an E vowel, an O or an E thematic vowel. You can see them alternating, O, E, E, O, E, O, according to the persons of the verb. And then you have the what you think of as the passive, but which are the middle and passive endings, my, psi, the S disappears and you get this contraction into either luce with an epsilon iota or luce with an iota subscript, then lucetai, lusamatha, lucesthe, lusantai. But you could have made those up. When it comes to the aorist middle indicative, you've got your syllabic augment if the verb begins with a consonant, or the lengthening of the initial vowel if it begins with a vowel. And then you have your stem lu and the sa, which is the sign of the aorist, and then the middle endings that are associated with past tenses. Elusa main, elusa sa, which becomes eluso, because the second of the s's disappears, the one between the alpha and the omicron, and a and o turn into an omega. So eluso, elusata, elusamatha, elusastha, and elusanta. Again, the rules of the system are dictating this, and the middle endings are the same as the passive endings. So here we have a full set of the indicative now in both the future aorist and the present and the imperfect and the perfect and the pluperfect. We have the endings that are middle and passive. Okay, that fills out the group. What we're missing and what we want to look at now briefly is the endings of the aorist middle subjunctive and optative. Okay. They're about to show up. There we go. As well as the infinitive. So here again, I think you could predict these in the indicative and the subjunctive and the optative. There's no augment. You have the SA, that's the sign of the aorist. You have the iota, that's the sign of the optative. And then remember the optative subjunctive contrast. The optative has the endings that are associated with past tenses, main, sa, ta, methus, the, nta. And the subjunctive has the endings that are associated with present tenses, my, psi, tai, methus, the, and ntai. So you end up lusai main, lusai sa becomes lusaya, lusai ta, lusai metha, lusai sthe, lusainta. Can't see the accent on the third person plural.
Oh, because I didn't write it.
Okay, there. It's a purple accent. And then in the aorist middle subjunctive, we end up with luso mai. Okay, the sa, the a disappears because you got this long vowel in the subjunctive, and the omega and the eta absorb that alpha. So you don't see it. You get an omega or an eta, not an alpha. So luso mai, luce. Notice that there's no ei alternative because we're talking about the subjunctive eta. Okay. So eta plus psi gives you eta iota subscript, only one. And then lusetai, lusomatha, lusestha, and lusontai, the long thematic vowels, make this distinct from the future, right? Which has the regular short thematic vowels, the E and the O. The aorist middle infinitive, you're going to have no augment because infinitives don't have tense, they have only aspect. So you've got lu, you have the sign of the aorist, the SA, and what you think of as the middle, but is also the passive. What you think of as a passive, but is also the middle ending for infinitives, sly. So that means to release for oneself, to ransom, okay, is the basic meaning of this verb in the middle. You see more than anything. So that's the way it works.